Good morning and happy Tuesday. My name is Michael Leeserman here with the Trial Guide's tip of the day this June 13th, 2023. Today's tip comes from the video Inside the Juror's Mind, What Every Trial Lawyer Needs to Know by David Wenner. Here to read the tip is David Wenner. Good morning, David.
Morning, Michael. It's good to see you. The more uncertain the jury, the more it kills your case.
What do you mean by that? The more uncertain the jury, the more it kills your case.
So again, one of the things that we did in our jury bias research is focus group the same case over and over again. We had a couple of different cases: slip and fall case, a breast cancer case, a wreck case, and we kept doing it over and over again. Again, we were doing it for research purposes, and what we found is that there were certain things that were important to the decision making. And one of the things that we learned is that there's a famous psychologist, Jerome Bruner, who coined this phrase that people go beyond the information given, and it really applies to trial practice, and that is that jurors go beyond the information given, and that means they make up evidence. And the more, they just make up evidence. I'll tell you about an experiment that was done in a moment, but the more ambiguity, the more uncertainty, the more jurors are likely to fill that with their own life experience, and generally with bias that's against the plaintiff, because oftentimes the plaintiff is the most salient thing in the story. Because what can people control in the story? They can control their own behavior, and they say, if that would have been me, I would have done this, that, and the other thing. So I tend to fill that with bias. And so it's really critical when you're telling a story, when you are trying to figure out what's the most persuasive story you can tell. And so when you're doing a focus group, you want to know where those holes are. So you tell them a little bit. What do you want to know? What do you think happened here? And so there was an experiment that was done. It was really very influential on my thinking early on by this fellow Neil Feigenson, and it was on blameworthiness of the victim, and when people blame the victim. And he did that with actually Peter Salovey, who at that time was a journeyman psychologist at Yale, and Feigenson was teaching law at Quinnipiac. And they did this experiment together, and Salovey, just parenthetically, is now the president at Yale. So anyway, what they did is they gave these subjects these scenarios, and they said, what happened here. And one of the scenarios was a guy sitting home on a Sunday watching a football game, and he hears a hissing sound. He goes over the furnace, and somehow the furnace blows up, and he's harmed and then dies. And one of the things that happened, and really was influential to me, and we saw this in our focus groups, is that people made up evidence. There was no evidence that the guy was comparatively at fault, and that's what they were testing. But these jurors, these subjects, started making up these stories about what this guy must have done to that furnace in order to make that happen. And so they literally created that. So, I think the big point here is that, when you are focus grouping your case, when you're building these cases from the bottom up, you need to know, what people would expect from the plaintiff, how they think the plaintiff should have acted in this setting. What do you think happened here? Because oftentimes, if you don't fill in those details, they'll fill them in for you, and it's generally bad. And people should read that study, because I think it was really, really very interesting. It was very impressive to me, and it just goes to show you that you got to make sure you fill those holes. You have ambiguity. If jurors are uncertain about what happened, you lose, plaintiff lose. And I'll leave you with this. I think that there's this status quo bias, and the status meaning that people don't want to change from the status quo. That comes from Kahneman and Tversky's work on prospect theory. And in the status quo for jurors is where the parties are when they walk into the courtroom. And that means no money has exchanged hands. And if they're uncertain, they're going to leave the parties in the position they found them in, and that is a defense verdict. So the question is, how do you reframe that so you change that status quo? And uncertainty is the quickest way for them to say, I'm not going to act. I'm going to leave the parties in the position. So
Wow. You need to give the juries motivation to go beyond the status quo, to take action in a way that'll be helpful or that will benefit society somehow is them doing good. So, wow, there's a lot in this to make sure the jury is not uncertain. And there's a lot in it to find the balance of not being too detailed, but also filling in enough gaps. And you can only do that, I guess, with focus groups to just figure out what's the right balance, right?
yeah, and I think you got to ask them, what do you want to know? I mean, how would you have behaved in this situation? What would you expect a person to do? And where people go sort of intuitively, and if they're going in a direction that you need to address, you need to do that before opening statement. And so, and do a discovery, a deposition, and that's why I think it's so critical to, if you're going to do focus groups, to focus group the case before the plaintiff testifies, so you can address those holes and that uncertainty.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us this morning, David.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let's now just pause, take a deep breath together, and be grateful to be alive this Tuesday. May the work that we do today help to reduce suffering in the world. May our efforts today help repair the world. May we fiercely and compassionately, because those things can exist together. May we advocate for our clients. May we champion their stories. I'm going to ring a bell 3 times now. This can take you into a meditation practice, a prayer practice, or just remind you, it's Tuesday. Wake up, go out, do good things, and have fun while you're doing it. Have a great day.